Hey everybody, I'm Daniel Hickson, and I'm doing another quick video on books that have impacted me, books that are worth engaging with, books that are worth doing business with. And I'm talking about another C.S. Lewis book today, the Screwtape Letters. I did a video, and I hope you saw it already, about Mere Christianity, which I discovered as I was graduating high school and going into college. And after I read Mere Christianity, I said, oh my goodness, this C.S. Lewis guy, this is a teacher that I want to sit under and sit at his feet and learn what he has to teach. And I'm still reading C.S. Lewis. I haven't read the whole corpus yet, but I hope to. So one of the very next books I picked up by C.S. Lewis was the Screwtape Letters. And the Screwtape Letters, I think at every church or ministry I've been pastor of, led some group through. And I believe this is an amazing book in many, many ways. This is a book, it's very interesting the way it's laid out, and that's one of the things that makes it an engaging book, and it's one of the things that just shows you how brilliant C.S. Lewis is. Much of what you find in here is very traditional, kind of conventional spiritual direction from the Christian tradition. And there's basically guidance in here about how to pray, how to get along with people in your household, how to practice love and charity, kind of in the weeds of everyday life, how to be on guard against false teaching, how to combat against pride or lust or envy. All these things are very traditional Christian spiritual guidance and direction. But he presents it in a very creative way. This book is, if you know anything about it, you know that it is a series of letters written by a senior demon or tempter named Screwtape to his nephew, who's a junior tempter, a junior devil called Wormwood. And so every letter is, my dear Wormwood, and he kind of talks about the patient. The patient is the man that Wormwood is trying to tempt. Wormwood is trying to basically damn him. He's trying to turn his soul away from God and away from truth and onto the path that leads to hell and destruction. That's what demons do. That's what devils do. And that's what Wormwood is doing. And Screwtape is writing letters to him to give him advice on how to basically secure this man's soul for perdition, for hell. And so every letter kind of deals with some topic or a couple of related topics that have to do with temptation, that have to do with, he's talking about how to tempt this guy. So if you're a Christian and you're reading it, you're kind of, it's like you got the enemy's playbook is sort of how this book is written. And there's some satire about that in here as well. But it's like you have the enemy's playbook, and so you can watch out for these things in your own life. Where I am being tempted to have that same kind of resentment toward the people in my household or in my workplace that I see him describing here. And that's kind of how the Screwtape Letters works. So everything is in reverse. When he talks about the great enemy, he's talking about God. He always calls him the enemy. When he's talking about our Father below, he's talking about Satan. And the chief of the fallen angels, right? And so everything is in reverse, and that kind of, to me, makes it an engaging read. You kind of have to, you can't really zone out. You have to stay engaged with it as you read it. Like all of C.S. Lewis's writings, of course, it was written in the middle of the 20th century, and and he's British, and he's not just a British man writing in the 40s and 50s, but he's a university professor from Oxford and Cambridge, from Britain, from the 40s and 50s. So for the contemporary American, sometimes his language is difficult, or he uses words in slightly different ways than we would, or he has an extremely expansive vocabulary, and sometimes you have to go look a word up. But for me, if a book is challenging, I find that to be a good thing. If I have to go look up a word when I'm reading a book, that means I'm learning, right? That means I'm being challenged. That means I'm having to stretch and grow intellectually. I don't want everything I read to be super easy like a cakewalk, or my mind will stagnate, right? So I encourage all of you, read books that you find difficult, and many of the great classics are difficult. Sometimes you have to go find some, Wikipedia page or some teacher or some commentary to help you understand what you're reading. Certainly, this is true of the Bible, and it's true of all the great classics of Western civilization. And that's a good thing. And that's true with C.S. Lewis. There are study guides to help you with the Screwtape Letters and other books of Lewis that are popular, and you may need to check into those. Certainly there are websites, and there are people who've read them before, a lot of pastors and priests who could probably give you some insight if you're struggling with something in it. But it's so well worth the read. It's one that I have come back to again and again and again. I think, like I said, every congregation that I've been pastor of, we've gone through the Screwtape Letters at least a little bit, and so it's a good book, and I commend it to you heartily. And it is also, and this is not true of every great work of Christian spiritual devotion or guidance, it's a funny book, and there are times you just have to laugh. But it's also, I really believe that C.S. Lewis, you talk about the charismatic gifts, I believe he had the gift of prophecy. There's so much that he wrote that he wrote in the early 20th century or the mid-20th century, and you look now in the early 21st century and you're like, oh my gosh, he saw what was coming. He looked at intellectual currents or cultural currents in his own day, and he could see where they were going to lead. And we are there now with a lot of these things that he writes about in his works, not only in the Screwtape Letters, but in all his works. And it's just marvelous to see that somebody was already thinking through these things. Somebody was already seeing through some of the deceptions that have taken many people in our world captive, and already kind of shining light, the light of the gospel, the light of the truth onto them. So the Screwtape Letters, great book. Like all of C.S. Lewis, it's a challenging book, but it's an enjoyable book and extremely edifying, extremely profitable for your spirit. So go out and get you a copy if you haven't read it, and if you have read it, put it on your list to work your way back to when you get the chance. It is well worth it, and I know I've read it many times, and I know I will, God willing, live long enough to read it again. So check that one out. And until we connect again, may God defend you from temptation and darkness and give you peace. Amen.